be more breaks throughout the day, so more coming up. But this next panel is going to be so exciting. I can't wait to get to it. But first, I want to do some reminders with everyone because I know we have some new folks joining us, and I want to make sure you know how to use the system. So just a reminder, if you have questions for this upcoming panel, you put the questions in the Q&A function. That is for questions and questions only. Reminder, you can label yourself with your name so we know who's asking the question. You can also upvote questions. If you have the exact same question as somebody else, no need to ask it. Just upvote somebody else's question, and that makes it more likely for that question to get asked. Reminder to step up and step back. If you are someone like me who loves to talk a lot and hear their own voice, step back today and let others who need to learn about our legislative session and voting rights talk first. Next, please be kind to each other. There are a lot of different learning levels in the space today. We want to make sure everyone is heard and everyone is getting to meet new people and ask questions. So be respectful of each other. Remember to take care of yourself. Make sure you're drinking water, using the restroom when you need to. Just don't take us with you, please. And then finally, visit the tables. And just a reminder, you can also take the elevator on the side of your screen to move up and down to the different floors, because there are several different floors that have our partners on them. We want you to sign up to get involved and volunteer. This is really important for this upcoming legislative session. We're going to need every single one of you to help all of our partners on this call. And also, we want to make sure that you're sharing social media from Battleborn Progress, or do your own social media and tag us and use the hashtag Nevada Summit. So hashtag Nevada Summit, all one word, is the hashtag for today. So please do social on this panel and more. Now I want to introduce our fabulous voting education organizer, Brian Harris, who is going to do an amazing job hosting this next panel all about voting rights. Brian, thank you for doing this for us today. Thank you for all your hard work protecting voting rights. And now we're going to talk about what voting rights taught us in 2022 and what it's going to teach us beyond that. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you so much, Annette. I really appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Glad you could really join us today and be here and be a part of this amazing panel that we're going to put on and a part of the Progressive Summit this year. My name is Brian Harris. I'm the voter education organizer here at Battleborn Progress. And I'd like to just give a quick overview of the session before we get started and introduce our guests. So in Nevada and states across the country, voters proved that elections should be fair and accessible. Voting by mail and same-day registration make getting to the polls more accessible and help secure our right to vote. This panel will discuss how we can protect these rights during the legislative session and why these rights should be expanded. So today we're joined by Cesar Carvajal, who is with Silver State Voices. We are joined by Christine Saunders, who is with Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. Also, Nevada State Senator James Orenshaw is with us, and also Samira Ramick with the ACLU of Nevada. So first, I'd like to kick it to Cesar. Could you talk to us about the actual counting process of the ballots, and also like why this voting by mail process makes it easier for ballots to get counted, but also get dropped off and things of that sort. So please take it away, Cesar.
Hi, thank you all. Again, my name is Cesar Carvajal, he, him, el pronouns. I'm the democracy manager with Silver State Voices, and to start things off, over the past couple years with the introduction of expansive vote by mail here in Nevada, our county election officials had to come up with a way to be able to, verify and count all the influx of vote by mail ballots. So, there is a 6-step process that all ballots have to go through. I'll go through them one by one, just really quickly. The first step is intake and sorting. Next, they go to the manual verification. Manual signature verification process, onto the tray inspection. Fourth is the central counting board. Fifth is tabulations, and the 6th is, they go into storage for about 18 months. And one important thing to note is here in Nevada, we are not a voter ID state. We verify votes through our signature verification. So the way in which uh, uh, the votes are verified is through signature matching. So the signature that you provide on your vote by mail ballot is compared to a number of other official government signatures that you provided. And that is actually observed through a bipartisan way. It's manually observed. So what's great, especially here in Clark County and in Washoe County as well, is that you're able to observe this process. So here in Clark County, we spent a number of days just watching the ballot counting process. We had folks observing at the elections department here on Trade and Cheyenne, and you could see folks from both Republicans and Democrats verifying each signature individually. So they go through each signature and they are able to match it again with a number of other official government signatures that you provided. And if there is a discrepancy, then they send it out to CURE. And that's a whole nother process, which, there's several ways to be able to verify that. If you are, if it is sent to CURE, there's a program here in Nevada called Text to CURE, which you'd be able to verify your signature through your own phone. You just have to provide certain personal information, and you can say, yes, that is indeed my signature. And but that's just how we here in Nevada are able to verify each vote is indeed accurate and does belong to each person.
Thank you so much for this, Cesar. And also, I would like to ask another question. Why is it important to ensure that we have an option for all eligible voters to cast the ballot if they do feel compelled to do so?
That's a great question, actually. Thanks to, again, the passage of Assembly Bill 321 in the 2021 and the 81st legislative session, now we have a number of different options to be able to get out to vote. We can vote by mail. We can either vote early during our 2 weeks of early voting, or we could wait until election day. And if you look at the voter turnout statistics in this past election, the majority of Nevadans opted actually to vote by mail. About 51% of all Nevadans were able to vote by mail. And why is this important? Well, if you look at past elections, when I think if you want to compare it to 2018, when expansive vote by mail still wasn't a thing, I think about 9% of all voters voted by mail. If you compare 2018 to 2022, you could see, there aren't as many lines. You don't have to wait in line as much, especially on the last day of early voting or on election day. So you have much more folks, much more voters becoming enfranchised and voting in a much more accessible way. I've been organizing through different capacities over the past about 7 years. And even my friends, who I tell them each and every election, go vote, go vote, go vote. Just being able to have a ballot mailed to you, and you're able to fill it out in the comfort of your own home. That just makes it much more easier. You could have them fill it out right in front of you. If they have any questions, you're there to help. But it just makes that so much more simple. They don't have to go to the ballot to a polling location to wait in line. That might be it might be out of their way depending on the person. Instead, again, from the comfort of their own home, they could fill it out. They could have someone drop it out for them, or they could just simply put it in the mailbox, or if they could also drop it off at a early voting location where again they don't have to wait in line to be able to cast that ballot. So it just makes it much more accessible for everyone.
Thank you for that, Cesar. I appreciate it. Next, I'd like to go to Christine Saunders from Plan. Could you talk to us a little bit about how has voting by mail made it easier for those who might have a harder time getting to the ballot boxes? I know Cesar touched on it briefly, but could you expand on that a little bit for us, please?
Yeah, thanks so much again for having me here, Brian. I think folks on this panel know that I will never turn down an opportunity to talk about how much I love vote by mail. So for folks who don't know, I actually grew up in Oregon, which is an entirely vote by mail state. And so I never actually had to vote in person until I moved to Nevada 5 years ago. And while I understand that some folks really love this tradition, and it's great that we still have that option available for folks, I think voting by mail is the best and simplest way to vote. Cesar mentioned a lot of the reasons why it's so great. You don't have to wait in line, which means you don't have to try to figure out when it's going to fit in with your schedule around work shifts or about if you need childcare for that time frame. One of the other things I really love about voting by mail, though, is that you can take your time and really do the research. You will get that ballot like 2 weeks prior to the election, and so I love to sit down with my ballot and any voter guides that I've received, my computer, and really feel like I'm an informed voter going through each of those races.
Totally. I actually did not know that Oregon was a completely vote by mail state. That's completely awesome. That's totally awesome because I think that it shows how people can really use this system to really get a feel for who's going to be put in those offices. And you actually brought up a very good point too, that we over at IPN have put out voter guide work this past election to help Nevada voters get educated on who will be on their ballot this year and the offices that they're going to be running for, and just a bunch of things. So my next question is, how do you feel that voting rights will come under attack during this year's legislative session?
Yeah, I think as we prepare for this upcoming legislative session, we know that national rhetoric about voter fraud has infiltrated Nevada. And so we are seeing a number of bill draft requests related to that. I know I've seen some related to voter ID, as well as some potentially repealing all of the great gains we made over the past few years, including vote by mail, same-day voter registration. And so I think that it's really important as we get ready to go into this legislative session and knowing that we have a divided legislature, to make clear that voting rights are not a negotiating topic. All of those strides that we've made over the past few years have made a huge difference in the voter turnout in Nevada and really increasing access for Nevadans to be able to have their voices heard in the legislative process too. And so we must ensure that we do not have any rollbacks on those policies.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that, voting is a right that everyone should have. And I don't think it's like having a Costco membership or needing membership at finish line or something for your shoes. I think voting it really should be accessible for all across the state. So I think that we should stand in a united front to make sure that things don't get repealed and we don't move in a backwards motion, because it would definitely be a tragedy if we did. So thank you for your insight on that, Christine. I really appreciate it. Next, I'd like to introduce Senator James Orenshaw. Could you please talk to us a little bit about how voting rights have changed over the last couple of years?
Yes, thank you very much, Brian, and thank you to all the panelists. Thank you everyone for working so hard on these issues through the years. I was first elected to the Assembly in 2006, and when I was first elected to the Assembly, we tried same-day registration in my very first session, and that failed. 2013, we had a bill out of the Assembly Elections Committee where we initially tried to allow same-day voter registration on election day. There was a compromise with the county clerks where they said it would be difficult to administer. So we pushed the registration deadline up to the last Friday before election day, till the end of early voting. That seemed pretty reasonable. The clerks and the registrars said they could still process the people who wanted to register during early voting, but the Republican administration vetoed that bill. So it's been, gosh, I guess about 15 years to see same-day registration finally happen in Nevada. Because when I first got elected, I, had to wonder, why is someone who's qualified to vote not able to vote if they didn't register 30 days before the election? With this artificial deadline, why is it keeping someone from participating in democracy? And luckily, through everyone's hard work and a lot of activism, that's finally been cured. The vote by mail, I think it's tremendous that we have that here in Nevada now, universal vote by mail. When I first turned 18 and was able to vote, I remember my first presidential election, there was no early voting. People had to vote on election day. You had to try to get that day off if you could from work, or to get some time off work, find childcare, find transportation to get to your polling place. Back then, you could only vote at your polling place in your neighborhood. There were no vote centers where you could vote anywhere near your work. You had to vote, usually it was at a school or community center in your neighborhood. And trying to get a mail-in ballot, back when I first turned 18 here in Nevada, was very difficult. You had to provide proof that you were either going to be out of state, or you had a medical condition that prevented you from going down to vote in person. So there were a lot of obstacles for keeping people from being able to vote and making it harder. And to me, obstacles like that, it's a form of voter suppression. And thanks to all the hard work of everyone here, all the activists, Annette and everybody that through the years that we've worked with, I think we've made a lot of strides in Nevada to remove those obstacles that kept a lot of people from participating in democracy. And certainly I hope that we won't see anything rolled back. And it's something I care deeply about, and hopefully we will, if anything, move forward in trying to remove obstacles and making sure more people can participate in democracy. Because, as I said, I think any obstacles in front of someone exercising their right to vote is a form of voter suppression.
Yes, totally. It is a form of voter suppression, because voting is a right that everyone should have. It's a way to get your voice heard for those elected officials who you stand in agreement with on the views that they have. So I feel like if anyone has issues to vote, that they should get those ramified and actually cast a ballot and get out there to make your views heard at the ballot box. So I know legislative session is approaching quite rapidly, and you'll be in legislative session. Could you talk to us a little bit about the bills that you might be working on this session?
Absolutely. This session, I'm fortunate enough to chair the Senate Committee on Legislative Operations and Elections. So we'll be working on a lot of bills that affect voting and elections. I know that there are bills coming from different sources to try to prevent any harassment of election officials. I believe that's coming from our new Secretary of State. I saw that Senator Daley up in Sparks has a bill regarding the issue with the fake electors. I know that there are bills coming in terms of trying to prevent anything that might try to scuttle an election or prevent it from happening, try to protect people's right to vote. And there's legislation coming on the other side too, which I believe would try to turn the clock back and put more obstacles in front of voters from exercising their right. So I think it's important to be vigilant on these issues this coming session. I know that sometimes there's a lot of other issues that get our attention, but the voting and election issues are so important, because I think we're at a stage here in Nevada where so many people are able to participate who 20 years ago would not have been able to participate, and it was just too difficult to vote, whether it was not having reliable transportation, health issues, things that kept them from being able to turn out on election day. So I think it's important for everyone to be vigilant this session, keep an eye on the bills that go to the Senate Elections Committee, the Assembly Elections Committee, and hopefully progress will be made and no turning the clock back in terms of people's right to vote and being able to participate.
Thank you so much for that, Senator Orenshaw. I definitely think that we should not go back to this legislative session. I know that there'll be a panel or session tomorrow that will cover legislative 101. So we'll also be talking about how folks can get involved. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Just one thing I forgot to mention. In 2013, the Assembly Elections Committee that I was I was chairing, we had a bill on vote centers, just to allow vote centers in any county that wanted vote centers. And, you know, a vote center is where you can vote anywhere near your work. It doesn't have to be your polling place the way it is now. And that was vetoed by the prior Republican administration. And to me, that's just a clear example of how a bill that, if anything, just made it so that someone could vote when they got off work in the area of their work, not have to drive all the way across town, you know, make it, removing an obstacle to vote, to participate, was also vetoed. And I'm so glad we have vote centers now, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that stuck out to me as just one thing that I couldn't really see a good reason that the administration vetoed that, but they vetoed vote centers. Felt that it was not something voters should have that right to be able to vote in any part of town that they happen to be in, maybe when they drop their child off at daycare or when they got off work. And it was just keeping an obstacle in front of people from exercising their right to vote. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. You're totally welcome. I definitely think that voters should not have that obstacle because, you know, what if you get to a polling location and it's like, you know, 2 minutes late and if you would have had just enough time, you would have made it. But these obstacles should not be in place. And I think that, you know, us understanding what's at stake in this legislative session for our voting rights is key in protecting what we have, and so we don't go backwards. So thank you, Senator Arshon, for that. I really do appreciate your perspective. Next, I'd like to introduce Amira Rahmat with the ACLU of Nevada, and I'd like to ask, how can Nevada voters get involved in the legislative process that can impact their voting rights?
Thank you, Brian. And I think given where we are now, that's a very appropriate question. Unfortunately, there are multiple ways for individuals to engage within the voting process at different levels, actually. And I think it starts with step one in having individuals who inform themselves when they are voting and selecting legislators who recognize the importance of democracy and the importance of voting to democracy itself, as well as because those individuals, as we know, are the ones that are bringing these bills forward, that are voting on these bills. So we need to have good representatives within our legislature that will protect those rights. And then I think right now where we are in terms of, as you stated, the legislative session is about to begin. Individuals can participate in multiple different ways. And Senator Orenshaw pointed out that there are multiple bills currently in the works, some that expand our right to voting and will provide more access and assure that everyone has that ability to vote. But also then on the contrary, having bills that will try to roll back the strides that we have made here in Nevada in expanding those rights. So I think it is crucial for individuals, and it can be anybody, and having individuals from our communities to be present at these meetings and to provide testimony in support, but also on the flip side, being there in opposition when we do see things that are not appropriate and that will hinder our ability to vote or other individuals' ability to vote. So just providing that support through testimony. And I think I don't want to overlook the fact that as well within our local governments, I know that we're talking about the legislative session here, but when it comes to voting, a lot of it, the administration, a lot of the election process is within our local governments. So individuals being there to participate and being there to provide testimony when they don't agree with what our local governments are doing. I think one great example is what we saw last year, at least within the ACLU, is when the Nye County Board of Commissioners had passed the hand counting mechanism for counting ballots. The way that we were able to effectuate that lawsuit and stop it from being implemented is individuals reached out to us and said, hey, we're worried about this. We heard about what had happened when we were at the Board of Commissioners meeting. We are worried about our votes not being counted. So not only, voting for the legislators who will be voting on these bills and then providing the testimony when these bills come up to hand, but also being involved within your local government and letting organizations such as the ACLU and SSV and everyone else know when there is an issue that does arise, so we can all kind of gather together and fight for those rights.
Yeah, I totally agree because, if folks would, understand that it's not just their their presidential election that really matters, but like their Secretary of State, their Attorney Generals, their their governor, like those elections really do count in terms of their day-to-day lives. Whereas the presidential election is important, but it's not going to fully impact your everyday lives and the things that you have to deal with. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
My next question is, how can we expand on voting by mail in the future? And like, if there's ways that we can make it better or improve on the system?
Yes, so as Senator Arnshaw and Christine had pointed out, we have came a long way. And just like as Christine, comes from Oregon, where they had, the expansive vote by mail. I'm actually on the opposite spectrum. I come from Kentucky, where vote by mail is, not really something that was even talked about, honestly. It wasn't really amplified as being an option. It was more so, as you had stated, Brian, and having to show that you had that hardship and getting, if you're out of state or something along those lines. So, but I think we've made these strides, but I think there are still ways to improve. The current vote by mail system obviously is, if everyone who's a registered voter will receive a mail-in ballot. It's an opt-out system. But unfortunately, even though we have that system in place, there are individuals who are within certain circumstances that prevents them from being able to utilize that. And one thing I would like to point out as an example is individuals who are in custody. Particularly these individuals who are in jail, they have not had their right to vote taken away. They still have that right. They can still receive their mail-in ballot, but that access that they are provided to be able to obtain that ballot is limited. And so expanding and making sure that we have the right infrastructure in place to have that accessibility. And also, and I think you pointed, kind of hinted at this as well, Brian, is the fact that since we've had this expansion, we've had, and as Cesar pointed out, 51% of people are now choosing to vote by mail. So you have a lot of demand for mail-in ballots, and improving the infrastructure in terms of making sure those ballots get out in time. I know during the past, last year, individuals sometimes had issues with getting their mail-in ballot, and it impacted people in rural counties because they have to travel far to drop them off. So more so in improving the infrastructure and truly making sure that that accessibility of mail-in voting is accessible to everyone.
Yeah, totally. I definitely think that we should be able to have the infrastructure that is able to be expanded, and we can definitely do that by staying in close contact with each other and communicating on the issues that we're seeing rise in different parts of the state. So thank you for that. I'd like to also let folks know who are watching that if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. I am receiving the ones that are in there now. I appreciate y'all, but I'd like to just remind y'all that if y'all have any questions or would like to see, if you'd like to upvote on questions that are already asked in the chat, please do so, and we'll get to those shortly. Cesar, did you have anything to add on to what Samir was talking about?
Yes, thank you. And I think Sadmira, that's a great point that Sadmira just mentioned. When a lot of folks that are not from Nevada think of Nevada, a lot of folks just think about Clark and Washoe County. But we have 17 counties, 15 other counties apart from Clark and Washoe. And as Sadmira just mentioned, Nye County, 68% of all voters in Nye County voted by mail this past election. And a lot of these counties live in really rural areas of the state that are far from voting locations. And I'd like to highlight in particular the Native communities that live here in Nevada. It's really hard for folks living in some of these reservations to get to a polling location. So vote by mail just makes it so much more accessible. If folks, in that county, there's the Yumba Indian Reservation. The closest polling location to the Yumba Indian Reservation is about 2 hours away from Tonopah. it's about 200 miles, more than 200-mile drive to, one way, to get to Tonopah. So it just makes it really inaccessible if we didn't have vote by mail. If we look at Elko County, that we have the South Fork Indian Reservation. That's about a 30-minute drive away. It's about 50 miles. Doug Valley is about an hour and a half away from Elko City. And it's about 90 miles away. So, when we think about vote by mail, it's not just making it easier for folks that live in Las Vegas, or folks that live in Reno or Sparks. It's making it easier for everybody to have that access, to be able to have their voices heard through that ballot box.
If I could just jump in, Brian, and I think Cesar, that you pointed out with the issue with Tonopah and having those polling locations that are a couple of hours, we saw that play out in 2022 when through our Voter Protection Alliance program with the ACLU and Election Protection Program with SSV. And also that's another great way for individuals to get involved when we have our volunteer program. So when the time does come, it would be great if we have individuals sign up to help us be poll monitors and making sure that when we do have these changes in laws that they are being followed at these polling locations. So I think that's another great way. I just wanted to point that out as well. But we did see through our program, we had a call in from an individual voter who lived 2.5 hours away from a polling location and who was waiting on a mail-in ballot. Unfortunately, it was last minute, but we were able to work with the clerk's office and getting that expedited and getting that to them to be able to vote. And had we not been able to do that, that individual unfortunately wouldn't have been able to cast their ballot. So it does have a direct impact.
Yeah, it definitely does. Thank you both for that. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I definitely think that making sure that we don't just think of expanding vote by mail for regular individuals, but for completely everyone, is definitely key. I'd like to go to some audience questions now. So there's one from Guadalupe Lynn. I'd like to pose this one to Christine. She asked, should Election Day be a federal holiday, and would making it a national holiday or federal holiday encourage more Americans to vote?
Yeah, I think that was a conversation that's been had for many years, and I think we really want to build up that voting is patriotic, and that it is a right that people have fought hard for in this country, and to celebrate voting. Like, voting is exciting, and if we could celebrate that as a country, that would be quite wonderful across all of the states, because it's wonderful what Nevada has done to expand access to voting. But like Samira mentioned, we want everyone across the U.S. to also have the same access to the ballot that Nevadans do.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I definitely think that some certain states have different takes on how they want their voting in their elections to go. But I think that if there was a way for all of us to celebrate one day where we can have, like, we don't have to go to school, folks just get the day off of work, to actually just sit down and take time to count, like, to cast your ballot and read up on who are going to be your elected officials if they do get elected, that would really do everybody a great justice and a great service. So cool. Thank you for that. Next question I'd like to ask, it's from Anonymous. They said, can you discuss why voter ID is a bad thing? I'd like to pose this one to Cesar.
Well, I think the issue is, not everybody has an ID. There are obstacles to getting an ID, and we saw this again through our election protection program this past election. In order to get an ID, you have to have time. You have to take time away from your day to be able to go to the DMV, and it's not a quick process. Sometimes you have to spend a couple hours there, and to working people, that's not ideal. That's taking time away from their work. They're losing money, and apart from that, there's an added cost being able to get an ID. So it just makes it a little harder for working families, for working people to be able to become enfranchised. I don't know if Senator, if you have any thing to add.
Oh, but yes, thank you. I think there are many in the unhoused and homeless population who unfortunately have been victims of theft and identification. Birth certificates sometimes have been stolen. In Nevada, we are a state where so many of our citizens were born in other states. Sometimes getting that birth certificate from the state you were born in presents a lot of challenges and is not an easy process. I know we've made strides in terms of ID for folks who are incarcerated and trying to make sure that there's help in terms of trying to help them get an identification when they're going back into the community, but it's not perfect. And as Cesar said, there are so many folks who struggle to get that identification, and sometimes getting the birth certificate from the state they were born in presents quite a challenge. A lot of folks have had victims of theft, and that it's a challenge. And I think that if they're trying to require that, when there's other things that people can bring that can attest to who they are, it is an obstacle that prevents qualified voters from being able to vote. And so that's the concern I have with laws like that.
Thank you for that, Senator Marshall. I appreciate it. I actually have another question for you. What should we be working on this session in terms of voting rights, and what should activists know about making their voices heard this session?
Well, I think our legislative process tries to lend itself to participation, whether you want to either go up to Carson City or go to the Sawyer building here on Washington to testify, or to testify via Zoom, phone call. I think in Nevada, our state legislators are very accessible. I think almost everyone tries to make sure their home number or cell phone is available to their constituents. So trying to reach out to your legislators, letting them know that these issues are important to you. I think that is very important. I think trying to encourage friends to reach out to their legislators. I think that matters so much when legislators see that people do care about issues regarding voting and elections. And I think my goal this session is for us to make progress in terms of making sure that we don't put obstacles in front of voters participating in democracy. We remove obstacles so that everyone who is qualified to vote can participate and can vote. I think we've made great progress in terms of removing those obstacles, and same-day registration, universal vote by mail, vote centers, as you were mentioning, Brian. There are many elections where I would see someone rushing, at 6:55 to their polling place, usually a school in the neighborhood. This is before vote centers, coming to vote, only to be told they had moved, that they might be able to vote a provisional ballot at that school, or else they could try to drive across town and see if they can make it to the place they should be at. And vote centers have changed that and allowed a lot more people to participate in democracy. So, I'm hoping this session we will accomplish things like that, make sure that no election officials are harassed or intimidated, and try to make sure that people can participate. So please, be active. I think the organizations here provide a good guide in terms of how to contact your legislators. And I think that, COVID shook up the whole world, but one of the positive things about this is that it's made the legislative process, I think, more accessible, whether it's through Zoom, phone calls, being able to participate, not having to go up to Carson City or to the Sawyer building if you're not able to. So that's one thing I hope that we'll keep in the legislative process, keep it more accessible through these different electronic means so that people can participate, let their voices be heard, even if they can't get up to Carson City or can't get down to the Sawyer building.
Yeah, I want to agree with you on that. Like, COVID did shake the world up, but overall, it's definitely made things like processes more transparent, because a lot of folks have more time on their hands to actually read over things and look over things and make sure that they're not getting tricked or scammed and things like that. So I definitely do agree with you on that point. There's another question in the Q&A chat that was from Anonymous, and this one is posed for I'll send this one to Sammy. We saw the incident that happened in Nye County with a volunteer while observing hand counting. What lessons have come out of that situation?
And I believe they may be referring to with the ACLU and individuals from the ACLU who were, and I don't know if they want to specify, but they were confronted by one of the, who we believe was a worker. I think one lesson is that it highlighted that these things do tend to happen. We've heard throughout, like, nationally, we're afraid of this happening. We're afraid of not only workers but individuals trying to prevent people from observing our democratic process. We've the heated warnings about this happening, and it really doesn't come to fruition, but we were able to see firsthand how it does come to fruition, and that is something we should be worried about. But I think also it highlighted the need to have protections for these individuals, and not just individuals that are trying to be observers, but the workers themselves. And the Senator Ornschall had pointed out that there is a bill trying to protect workers from harassment. So unfortunately, those things did occur. Those things can happen. I think it's understanding that it's a possibility, and then working on plans and working with individuals who are empowered and making sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, totally. I feel like our election workers and elected officials definitely do deserve to be protected, because they do such great work here in the state of Nevada, and we really want to make sure that they can continue to do that work. So I totally agree with you. Christine, I want to pose a question to you. We have one from Anonymous, and it says, we hear so much about voter fraud. So really, how prevalent is it?
Voter fraud is not very prevalent across the nation, and I think Cesar explained why in the first question when you talked about what does that counting process look like and how do we do verification, and that we have very strong systems set in place to verify signatures and ensure that folks are only voting once, folks are voting only for themselves. Growing up my entire time in Oregon, I can't remember a single instance of voter fraud being the case, never in the news. And when we implemented vote by mail here, I know that there were a lot of concerns, and I reached out to folks in Oregon to ask, how do I, dissuade some of those concerns? And their response was, oh, we never thought of that, because it's so normal and safe in Oregon. And I hope that it gets to a place in Nevada where everyone feels the same way. And you should know, like Cesar mentioned and Samira, that you can go observe that ballot counting process and really see the great work that our election workers are doing to ensure that everyone's vote is counted.
Yes, that is very true. Thank you for that. That actually leads us to our next question. We have a few on this topic, and I'd like to pose this one to Cesar. This one's from David Hatton. So please provide us with the specifics on how to register / apply to become an election representative.
I love this question just because Silver State voices this as we one big when elections come our way, one of our big priorities is election worker recruitment. So every year before elections, the counties start to ramp up on election worker recruitment. And actually, in this past year, it hasn't been as much of an issue. Folks have really been, applying to become election workers. But you can go to your county's website wherever you live, and you can apply there. There is a link to be able to apply. And one important thing about being an election worker, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a bipartisan it's a bipartisan effort. There's folks from that are registered Democrats and folks that are registered Republicans, both doing the whether it's signature verification process, whether it's tray inspection. It's a bipartisan effort, and we do recommend, if you are interested in becoming an election worker, visit your local county's website. You can visit your local county office and apply there. But it's a really simple process, and we really encourage it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Cesar. Christine, there's one question for you. This one says, it's from Shelby. It says, same-day voter registration is universally liked and used by both parties. Why would anyone want to get rid of that?
I don't know. That's the simple thing. I don't know why anybody would want to get rid of that, because I think same-day voter registration has been great for people who maybe want to have moved and forgot to update their registration and missed that last-minute deadline. For folks who maybe want to change their political party, I know we saw during the primary, folks who didn't realize that we have a closed primary in Nevada were able to show up and re-register with same-day voter registration to be able to vote in the primary ballot of their choice. Same-day voter registration has just made it so much more accessible for folks who, at the last minute are able to take advantage of the system we've set up for them.
Totally. Thank you for that. Next question is for Senator Ornschans from Guadalupe. The question is, how can our state, Nevada, and the rest of our country protect the election infrastructure against cybersecurity threats?
That's a great question. I know in past sessions, we've had bills that, there's a particular term of art and it's escaping me right now, but bills that try to go through and, through all the computer systems, and I apologize that I'm blanking on that right now, but I believe that, our Secretary of State's office, our county clerks and registrars are certainly working hard to try to prevent that from happening, but I think that's certainly a concern, with hacking and things like that we need to always be vigilant on, whether it's through legislation or through our county clerks, county registrars, and the Secretary of State's office. I believe we've been, very fortunate here in Nevada that I don't think there's been anything like that here in Nevada, but I think it's something we have to always, be concerned about. And I apologize right now, I'm blanking on that term of art, but we have passed some legislation in the recent past that tries to go through with the computer systems and kind of monitor and check everything. So we have passed legislation like that in Nevada, and it's a risk limiting audit. That's the term of art, risk limiting audits, that we've recently passed legislation on through the prior Secretary of State. And so I believe that's an added security feature that we do have in Nevada.
And Brian, if I can just hop in for just 1 second.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I just do want to add in terms of security of elections, and this is something that's been obviously not just unique to Nevada, but obviously across our country. As Senator Ornschans has pointed out, we have measures in place that assure that our elections are secure. We have audits that are conducted on the county levels. It is within our statute, is something that was passed that is required. But if you look at the history of what took place as these allegations were being put out, several of those individuals that were spreading their lies, they're spreading that our elections aren't secure, that there's issues, that this is on one side, Democrats doing this. They did file lawsuits, and so there was many lawsuits actually that were filed, and none of those lawsuits from every spectrum in every state had any merit in terms of there being any election fraud within any of those states. So I think it's important to point out that there was not only others stating, hey, this is not happening, but you had a legal process that took place throughout the country on a state level, on a federal level, that showed this from these third parties that there was no election fraud.
Yes, totally. I definitely think that that's a fact. And there's one other question I'd like to ask from Guadalupe. She asked, why is it Election Day a national holiday in our country, USA?
Is that for me, Brian?
Yeah.
Or was
And,
that to
no, that was for you, Sandy. Sorry.
and for some reason there was a brief break in between that, but you said, why is it voting not a national holiday within? I think it should be. I think for whatever political reasons that has not came to fruition, but I wish I had the insight as to what actually motivated these individuals to not want to push that through. But I completely agree that it should be a federal holiday. It is the core of our democracy, and something that is the core of our democracy should not be overlooked in that way.
I totally 100% agree. Senator Ornshaw, would you have anything to add to that point?
Oh, we're just was going to have that. I hope someday we'll see that. That I think would take federal action. But I mean, I've heard talk of that through the years of a movement to try to make Election Day a national holiday. I'm hoping, perhaps we'll see Congress act on that and the president sign that in the law someday soon.
Yeah, hopefully. I definitely think that would be great to see within some time coming. So we can wrap up pretty soon. So I'd like to go to each speaker and get final thoughts. So Christine, do you have any final thoughts or things that you'd like to say?
I guess I will just close off by saying that vote by mail and all of the other things that Nevada has passed over the past few years in order to make voting more accessible has made huge strides in our ability for voters to access the ballot. And we have seen the results of that. And I think it's important that we make sure that we protect that going forward.
I agree. Cesar, closing remarks?
Yes, and thank you all so much for having us. And I just like to say, vote by mail just makes voting much more accessible for all. I think recently it's become a political issue, but it's, all Nevadans have taken advantage of vote by mail. About 500,000 Nevadans over this past election voted by mail, including, both Republicans, Democrats, nonpartisan folks. I think about 150,000 plus Republicans voted by mail, and it's become a political issue. But when you look at the voters, all voters use it, and it just makes voting much less of a hassle for everyone involved.
Yeah, 100%. I think that we should definitely continue with this motion. Let's see it grow in the future. Sammy, would you like to add any closing remarks?
Well, I think Christina and Cesar pretty much, made great closing remarks in terms of, to close out the session. But I think, as Cesar pointed out, is that this is not a partisan issue. We have on both sides people who benefit, and there should never be a question as to whether we should expand access to voting. That should just never be a question. That should never be a debate. And because our democracy is the democracy if everyone has that option and can exercise that option if they choose to do so. So I think I enjoyed this panel. I'm glad that for the individuals who participated in viewing it, and I think that's a great start in getting involved and making sure that we continue to expand the voting rights here.
Yes, I 100% agree. Thank you so much for that. And Senator Ornshaw, I'll leave you to give us the last set of words before we wrap.
Well, I think to echo what the prior speakers, Cesar and Christine and Sammy stated, I think that universal vote by mail is new to Nevada. So, the data is new, but the data we have shows that it's very popular in the less populous counties and the rural counties, popular across party lines. So it's increasing access to voter participation across the board, regardless of party, regardless of whether you're in an urban area or a rural area. And it's removing obstacles that might have kept people from voting. I think same-day registration. I remember a hearing we had years ago where an opponent of same-day registration said, well, if someone really cares about voting, they'll make sure they make that deadline 30 days before and they'll register. And we had a student from UNLV testifying about how busy they were with finals, and they were kind of paying attention to the election, but they only really got interested that week before election day, and they'd missed the deadline to vote. But they were qualified to vote otherwise, just they missed that deadline, and so they couldn't vote. And there's no reason to place artificial obstacles in front of people being able to exercise their right to participate in democracy. So hopefully we'll make strides forward. We won't turn the clock back. And I appreciate how hard everyone on this panel and all the organizations have worked towards trying to make that happen, because it's definitely night and day from when I turned 18. You had to vote on election day. Like, you couldn't get time off work, if you couldn't find childcare, if you couldn't get a ride to your polling place, you were in trouble. You weren't going to participate. So we've made great strides, and thank you for having me on this panel.
Thank you. I really appreciate you and Christine, Sammy, and Cesar. I really want to say thank you for joining us today and giving us some really great insight on the vote by mail system and how we can expand on it in the future, and what we learned from 2022 and how we can take it into 2023 and move forward. So thank you once again. I really want to say I appreciate you all for joining us, and I will pass it back to Annette.
All right, thanks, Brian. Great job on your first big panel. I'm so proud of you. And thank you to all of our fabulous speakers, Sammy, Christine, Cesar, Senator. Y'all are amazing, and we appreciate the work you do every single day on voting rights. So thank you for being here and sharing your time with us today. Just want to flag that in the chat, we cannot have people spamming. We'd love to have you involved. We'd love to have you doing the work with us. Aaron, our Story Bank organizer, would love to have you involved with his work. So get in touch with Aaron, but please do not spam in the chat, because we will have to turn off that chat function if it continues. So please don't do that. That is for conversation only, not spamming on different issues. If you have a real question, please put that in the Q&A for us, and we will get to that on the next panel. All right, everyone, we're going to go to a longer break this time. We're going to go to a lunch break, and we will be back with you at 12:55 with a special message from our Attorney General, Aaron Ford. So stick around. We'll be back at 12:55. Go have lunch, use the restroom, and come back at 12:55. Thanks, everyone.